There's something in my heart and from the people I've met, their hearts as well. And I don't really have a great way to explain it beyond the basic instinct to leave a dent. So I explain it like Everest.
How many miles we at, Kyle?
Kyle,
Yeah.
how many miles for the day?
People climb Everest. Quite a few people now, but it's an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
Corner's like a protractor.
Nice.
Oh!
Mark
Wow.
was lucky he didn't roll.
Yeah, we almost got that guy in.
And yet people line up and there's a wait list because there is an idea that you can achieve something that so many people haven't or wouldn't even consider.
It is a purgatory to hell drive every 15 minutes.
This is wasting time is what it's doing.
So to some people looking at Cannonball, they say, well, that's so crazy, it's out there.
And when you're planning a trip like this, is a AAA of any use to you?
Actually,
And so for some people, it's like a lifelong dream to do one of these things. And another person can come along with this Everest mentality and say, well, there's not much stopping me from doing this.
While the movie Cannonball Run was slapstick, it was based on real-life efforts to race from coast to coast. And last month, a seemingly unbeatable record was broken. 3 car enthusiasts made it from a garage here in New York City to a hotel in Redondo Beach, California, at a heart-pounding speed.
The Cannonball Run is an obscure and unsanctioned coast-to-coast road race, starting at the Red Ball Garage in New York City and finishing across the country at the Portofino Hotel in Los Angeles. You can take any route with any motor vehicle as long as you go as fast as possible. But that's the simple version. The truth, well, the Cannonball Run is way more than that. I'm Mallory Keenoy, and welcome to the Cannonball Podcast, the untold story of the Cannonball Run as I've come to know it. So, here's the deal. Yes, this podcast will be all about the race, its innovation, good old American spirit, and all kinds of big picture stuff. But it's also a story of good times, crazy antics, funny stories, in a community you won't find anywhere else. And it all traces back to one guy, Brock Yates.
In fact, they'll tell you that they want to see people in race cars hurt or even killed, and that's the only reason they come. Well, I say nonsense. I say, based on my years of experience in this sport, that these people come here to vicariously ride with these drivers, to see them encounter all sorts of adversity and a lot of hazard and a lot of danger, but they want to see them survive. It is the essence of this spectator involvement with this sport to see adventure, confrontation, and survival.
Brock Yates was an automotive journalist. He wrote a lot of books. He was an author. He was a car guy from the start. And he was an illustrator, actually. He drew a lot of cartoons. But eventually he became the editor at Car and Driver magazine and just wrote a bunch of cool articles, did all sorts of cool things in cars, lots of adventures.
This is Christopher Michaels, automotive artist and cannonballer, which I'll loosely define as someone who has participated in the Cannonball Run or a Cannonball Run type event in some capacity. But like Christopher said, Brock Yates wore a lot of hats, and his work at Car and Driver, the iconic American car magazine, is where he really made a name for himself. He started there in 1964 and hung around for more than 4 decades.
In the late 60s, as the early 70s, as the oil crisis hit and the national speed limit was put in place at 55 miles an hour, he, being a car guy who loved to drive fast, just thought, man, I don't want to just drive 55, the double nickel, they called it. That's boring. You're never going to get anywhere. And he had a lot of like-minded friends. And eventually he decided, you know what, I'm going to prove that you can drive across this country faster than that.
Let's pause for a second. A lot of what people know about the Cannonball Run is tangled up in the myths and rumors and the wild movie versions. But that's part of the fun of the Cannonball. I mean, it's a legend for a reason. But this podcast isn't just a story about the fast cars or statistics. It's about why people felt the need to race across America in the first place. Essentially, why did the Cannonball Run grow into something bigger than just a race? So my goal is to try to set the record straight or bring in new insights over this series. For starters, like Christopher, many attribute Brock Yates' creation of the Cannonball Run to the enactment of the 55-mile-per-hour national speed limit. Although it is part of Cannonball's history, and we'll get to all that, that law did not exist during Yates' first Cannonball. To figure out where this all really began, we need to look at what else was happening around the United States, because things were changing.
We have protested that use of the university in the past. We have protested the use of the university to support the war in Vietnam by again discovering military means to resolve social and political problems.
The late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of major upheaval in the United States. Think protests over the Vietnam War, civil rights, and women's liberation. But Yates' story begins with an often forgot-about movement of the era, the fight for the environment. For the first time, Americans were waking up to the impact we have on our planet.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
Through the 60s, and especially in the late 60s, there were a series of sort of made-for-TV environmental disasters, oil spills, the so-called death of Lake Erie, just really, really dramatic examples of environmental problems that were hard to ignore.
Chris Wells is a professor and chair of environmental studies at Macalester College. As an environmental historian, his research focuses on the way that technological and socioeconomic systems have reshaped the American environment.
And so all of that sort of culminated right around 1970 in a couple of major things. One was the first Earth Day in April of 1970. And to that point, that was the largest mass mobilization of protest in American history. And even today, it remains one of the biggest.
This is a CBS News special, Earth Day, a question of survival.
This planet is threatened with destruction, and we who live in it with death. The heavens reek, the waters below are foul, children die in infancy, and we and the world, which is our home, live on the brink of nuclear annihilation. We are in a crisis of survival.
That, in turn, helped spur along legislation at the federal level. And so the creation of the EPA, the passage of the National Environmental Policy Act are sort of the watershed moments where this new environmentalism kind of made it into federal politics in a new way. So I think that's sort of the context in which the first Cannonball Run got launched, or the revival got launched.
So environmentalism caused the Cannonball Run? I mean, the answer is kind of. As Chris explained, the government started rolling out all these new regulations. I mean, hello EPA and Clean Air Act. And these regulations were aimed at keeping industries, especially automakers, in check. To no surprise, Brock Yates and other car enthusiasts weren't thrilled. To them, those laws didn't just limit cars, they limited drivers. In 2001, Yates wrote a book all about the Cannonball Run, simply titled Cannonball, which I highly recommend you read. In it, he wrote about the new environmental changes.
We were sure the new Environmental Protection Agency and the Occupational Safety and Health Agency were bound to unleash legions of nanny-state bureaucrats on us, with the sole mission of herding us into a mass of spineless, subservient humanity, obedient to the will of Big Brother.
To Yates, this was war on the auto industry. New rules meant new technology, which really meant big money and big risk fast.
The auto industry was not at all supportive of regulations, environmental regulations, and the ones that hit hardest were related to the Clean Air Act. Essentially, it said the federal government is going to set targets for how much new automobiles are allowed to release into the air of important, nasty emissions. The auto industry's stance was there's no technology that would allow us to reduce these things on the order of 90%, which is what the legislation was calling for. And if the technology doesn't exist, how can you legally require us to do it? And the answer in the legislation was basically, we don't know how you're going to do it, but you have to. And if that means you need to spend a bunch of money on research and development to figure it out, then you need to spend a bunch of money on R&D to figure it out. And the auto industry leaders basically said, if you leave this, essentially it's going to crash the industry. Prices are going to skyrocket. We'll have to pass all of the costs on to consumers. It's going to be prohibitively expensive. We don't even know that we can do it, even if we spend a huge amount of money trying. This is terrible lawmaking, right? And on the other side, they said, you guys are creative. You're at the cutting edge of American technological prowess. Figure it out. You can do this.
Many of the improvements in the 1975 model year are related to performance, fuel economy, maintenance, and yes, the environment. One of the most significant advantages of the new fuel-saving system is the addition of the catalytic converter developed by GM.
Ultimately, they were able to produce the technology. It did, in fact, reduce emissions dramatically. It did not add the sorts of costs that the auto industry predicted. It did not cause massive layoffs or loss of competitiveness or anything like that.
But that technology didn't take hold until 1975. So for the time being, Yates would continue to resist the environmental regulations, while most Americans welcomed them with open arms.
Each of us all across this great land has a stake in maintaining and improving environmental quality. Clean air and clean water, the wise use of our land, the protection of wildlife and natural beauty, parks for all to enjoy. These are part of the birthright of every American. To guarantee that birthright, we must act, and act decisively. It is literally now or never. These problems will not stand still for politics or for partisanship.
This was a broadly bipartisan movement, and people genuinely believed that environmental issues were something that cut across all of the other social and economic differences in the country. There was a very strong belief that improving the environment for anyone was improving the environment for everyone, that we all benefited from this.
Everyone but big businesses, who saw the new rules as an assault on their freedom.
The auto industry saying this is massive overreach on the part of the federal government, not new. And so that strain of sort of libertarian, business-oriented interpretations of what freedom means, they go back. There's nothing new about this. So Yates is very much carrying a banner for something that's deeply entrenched in American culture. On the other hand, the idea that government can do things that are to the benefit of most people, that also has long, deep roots in American culture. So the idea that these two things are at odds with each other, I think, is what was new in and around the emergence of Cannonball Run.
And like other Americans of the time, Yates decided to turn his frustrations into a protest.
Think of Earth Day protests. In 1970, there's at least one where college students, bought an old car and buried it as a way to protest. That's pretty, it's dramatic. It's kind of silly. It highlights all sorts of different things in ways that aren't really about policy and are more sort of cultural protest. I think Yates is basically indulging in the same sort of thing, just on the other side of the argument. I think that he's very consistent with the flamboyant, in-your-face, late 60s, early 70s protest culture of the United States. He just happens to be a little bit more establishmentarian in his leanings than is typical for protesters. But he's absolutely normal for the time, I would argue.
As Yates put it in his book,
What a better time to add to the national psychosis.
Yates conceived of his scheme on the way to lunch with some fellow car and driver staff in early 1971. He originally called it the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash, which we now know as the Cannonball Run. Although some loved the idea, others thought he was nuts. But it was too late. For Yates, the race was underway and he began making plans.
And he got this van called Moon Trash and got his son and a couple of friends, and they all piled in with a bunch of snacks and big gas tanks.
Other gearheads and automotive journalists initially agreed to join Yates on this crazy mission, but as the race edged closer, things began to fall apart. All other possible teams dropped out, including a possible appearance by Robert Redford. And car and driver editor Bob Brown was getting nervous at the idea of co-signing a technically illegal race. But that wasn't going to stop Yates. In May of 1971, Brock Yates, his son the 14-year-old Brock Yates Jr., along with car and driver editor Steve Smith and former staff member Jim Williams, hopped in a modified Dodge van nicknamed Moon Trash and set out on the first ever Cannonball Run, a solo burn across the country from New York to LA.
And they took off, and they did that in early 1971. And they did a run across country, and car and driver covered it.
The crew raced all the way from Smith's apartment on East 35th Street in New York City to the Portofino Hotel in California. Yates wrote in Car and Driver,
The other guys in the automotive press can sit around and recommend letter writing to your congressman. But I've had it. From here on in, I'm going to use the road according to my own skills and capabilities, and not in conformity with a 49-year-old cradle-to-grave squarehead bureaucrat who wouldn't know a good automobile if it ran over him.
The very first Cannonball, really more of a test run, clocked in at 40 hours and 51 minutes. Not bad for a souped-up van. Yates wrote about his Moon Trash experiment in Car and Driver that August, but not many people picked up on it. One of the few who did was Boston Globe reporter Ron Mead, who wrote,
Several months ago, a number of the country's leading automotive heads were talking of topical subjects: encroachment of concrete, ecology and the car, governmental toadyism, and the plight of the auto enthusiast, seeing the rain-in-the-face style of motoring being replaced by an airbag in the face. Some form of protest was called for. It is now possible for a contemporary man in a contemporary motor car to cross the United States, sans Alaska and Hawaii, in less than 2 days.
And and he thought, okay, all right, I drove across the country, I proved it. But then immediately people were like, man, that's amazing. I want to do this. Let's all get together and do it. And he was like, really? Okay, cool.
Yates considered a race sometime in the future. However, when Yates received a telegram from the Polish Racing Drivers of America, an unseriously serious team, in the future became as soon as possible.
This constitutes formal entry by the Polish Racing Drivers of America in the next official Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash. The drivers are Oskar Kowaleski, Brad Niemanczyk, and Tony Adamowicz. If we can find California, we'll beat you fair and square.
So later that year in November, they got some more people together. And this time he got his friend Dan Gurney, who's an incredible race car driver. And somebody loaned them a Ferrari Daytona.
Yates' new co-driver wasn't just a great racer, but an absolute legend. Dan Gurney won 4 Formula One Grand Prix, the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1959, and the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1967. And now he was looking to win the Cannonball. This is Dan Gurney speaking about the Cannonball on YouTube.
And we did it from downtown Manhattan, the Avis Garage, to the motel, I should remember the name, on the coast here in California.
In November of 1971, 8 teams lined up for the second Cannonball Run. The drivers ranged from NASCAR pros to a Caltech pharmacy student, and the cars were just as varied, from Yates and Gurney's Ferrari Daytona to a lumbering Travco motorhome. Cannonballer Bob Carey wrote of his Travco experience in Yates' book.
Parker's wife Ginny had supplied us with delicious trays of nice gooey baked lasagna. All we had to do was stick it in the oven and eat it piping hot. Broderick served, the Travco swerved, the lasagna skated, plop. Have you ever tried to clean gooey cheese lasagna from the nap of a shag rug?
Despite the differences in the teams, they all had the same goal: drive fast and win.
As luck would have it, there was one of those gas stations where you could put money into this machine and get gasoline. So that's what I was doing, and all of a sudden, here comes a very red-faced highway patrolman, almost purple instead of red.
This is Dan Gurney again, talking at a panel at the Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance in 2011, sitting right next to Brock Yates. He is retelling the story about their run-in with the law on that 1971 Cannonball.
And so I figured if we were doing well in this race that we couldn't talk about, why, this is bad news, but I couldn't ask him to hurry and write it. Gradually, he wrote it and gave me a ticket, and so then it was almost time to go, and he said, oh, by the way, how fast will that thing you're driving, how fast will that car go? This car right here. And I said, I figured he had just lost us the race, so I said, it'll go a lot faster than that thing you're driving. So anyway, he didn't think that was very funny, but he did. And then, so when Brock and I got back on the road again on the highway, he said, you know, how fast do you think it will go? So we said, well, let's try it. And we did. We ran on this pedometer, we ran 172 miles an hour.
You know, there's no prize money. There's nothing, you don't really win anything. It's just something to go and do. And they all had a great time.
If you're wondering what running a cannonball in the 70s was really like, I mean, that was it. A little bit of chaos, a lot of skill, and just enough audacity to see how far they could push it. Yates and Gurney pulled off the win with a time of 35 hours and 54 minutes. A new record, but not exactly the kind you'd see in any world record book. But still pretty incredible. And honestly, Yates didn't seem to care much about fame or glory, like he wrote in his book.
New York City to Los Angeles is the most storied overland road in the United States. Get your kicks on Route 66. And it seems worthwhile to find out just how fast that trip could be made.
There's a real famous picture of everybody on the rooftop of the Red Ball garage, and they're all posed in front of their cars.
This photo is a part of the March 1972 issue of Car and Driver, where Yates documented the second Cannonball Run. He wrote,
The concept had been refreshing in its simplicity. Whereas every automobile competition in the world is encumbered by a thicket of confusing rules, the Cannonball Baker had but one. All competitors will drive any vehicle of their choosing over any route at any speed they judge practical, between the starting point and destination. The competitor finishing with the lowest elapsed time is the winner.
Once that article hit newsstands, the secret was out again, and the letters started pouring into Car and Driver.
I have just canceled my subscription to your magazine because of Brock Yates' article on the Cannonball Baker. I'll renew my subscription when Yates is no longer affiliated.
I would just like Yates to know that I've cut out his March editorial and framed it on my wall. Impeccably stated, my boy.
Racing across the country on public roads is reprehensible enough in its own right without publicizing it.
As a blow struck for free men everywhere, it was inspiring. And as a race, it must have been fun as hell. And as a towering question as to the validity of present laws and the government's moronic preoccupation with the passive protection of all of its little sheep, it was downright superb.
This was just the beginning for the Cannonball Run. Over the next 50 years, the Cannonball Run evolved into something greater than Yates could ever imagine.
He could do anything he wanted. Hal made him do anything he wanted, and Brock Yates kind of got left in the idea chain.
I can take a nap if he's driving 100 plus miles an hour because I know that he's not going to take dumb risks.
I did not intend to be the keeper of all records or the governor of anything like this, and nor did Brock.
Why couldn't I be the Erwin Baker of electric vehicles?
Wait a minute. If that really happened, that's crazy, and I need to know about it.
This series was created and produced by Mallory Keenoy. Executive producer, Tom Keenoy. Voice actors, Scotty Quays, Matthew Porter, Rob Reed, and Sean P. Williams via Voice 123. Additional voices, Walter Garrity, Rio Kalish, and Tom Keenoy. Thank you to Sean Mason for kicking off this series. To the Cannonball community, past and present, thank you for keeping the legend alive and proving that tradition and responsibility can share the same road. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters for helping make this project possible. An extra shout out to the Cannonball Sun Solar Car team, the ones who first sparked this journey. Select archival audio and materials were used under fair use for commentary and historical context. This series was inspired by the many stories, films, and records that have kept the legend of the Cannonball Run alive for generations. Music licensed through Foxy Music. Additional production support from Walter Garrity and Jay Roberts. Thanks for listening. You can find us at The Cannonball Pod on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, like, and subscribe for more.